No less a religious authority than the late Pope Francis called out the Trump administration's war on empathy. After Vice President Vance argued that Christians should be stingy with their love, prioritizing those close to us over strangers, he offered a rebuke. Now, I read that quote, and I think I understand what he was actually trying to say. I'm going to talk both sides for a second here. I think it's right in the sense of sequence. If you simply talk about sequence, right? So when a child is born, the first people he should receive love from is the parents, right? That's sequence. Now, that family, his family, that child's family is not the only people that he's going to love, right? So the idea of if you grew up in church, you grew up with this idea of God, family, and outward, right? That's an idea of sequence. But on another level, this idea of family first, whatever, is actually also pagan, more than Christian, right? Remember, people in the early church, that people observing Christians in the early church were surprised by the fact that the Christians treated each other like family. They called each other brother and sister. When the pagans prioritized blood ties, blood family first, the Christians were prioritizing people that weren't family, that weren't blood family. So even though I understand in sequence, and there are responsibilities that we have, if you're talking about God's love doesn't know bounds like that. Jesus dies for the stranger. Jesus dies for his enemy. Jesus dies for family. Jesus died all equally. So that you can't take God's love and do that. And this is what politicians do. They dilute it. They make it shallower. So he's in sequence. I believe that's right. You know, if my son, when it comes to my love, my love, right? The love as a father, love as a mother, which can be similar to God's love, but God's love is much greater than the love of a father and a mother. There's similarities, but you can't say it's the same thing. It's still not even the same thing. Why? God loves your enemy more than you love your own kid. God loves your enemy more than you love your mom. God loves your enemy more than you love your wife. So this is not a comparison. He's maybe talking about the sequence of human love here. That's really what I think this is more is, because remember, the pagans prioritized family over strangers, where the Christian, man, they were loving everybody as if they were family. And so I want to make sure I understand what he was saying there. But again, it's a shallow statement. It's a shallow version of God's love. It really is. And we have to expand more, because you have to remember that blood family was held higher among the pagans, and the church is a new kind of family. It is a new kind of family, and a much larger one than our own. And also, that is the church, is the family Jesus promised to us if we devote our lives to the gospel, right? He says, if in this life and the next, he gives up brother, sister. So he talks about, in a sense, giving up, or you know, he talks about this idea of loving him beyond family, right? So Jesus talks about this, but he promised double, larger in this life and the next life. And so you have to also understand that this is actually a good thing. It's not like a bad thing. I'm not trying to downplay the sequence, but I just want to add here. It's not my intention to downplay. It feels like it because I'm bringing up another side to things. But people come from really broken homes, and they have no concept of family. No concept of family. And so what would happen if you have this group? Well, it's God, then my family, then you. So forever in his life, forever in that person's life, they're always third, fourth, or fifth on the list. They're never that second one on that list. That's why the list isn't completely true in the sense of God's love. That is not really an expression of God's love, right? It may be the way humans love. We make a list of who to prioritize, but the fact that God's even on a list is also offensive, right? It's also offensive to God. God shouldn't even be on a list. God is not a thing in a sequence of things, you know? So we got to be careful sometimes with those lists. But I think I understand where you're trying to go, you know. But again, my point above all is that politicians dilute this stuff, man. They dilute this stuff naturally when they talk because it's just a shallow faith. There's a shallow faith. And so people have broken families. Jesus says, as we love, him, right? As we follow him, he will give us family in this life and the next. And so don't be afraid to love people outside that list as if they were your own. Again, I think it's a sequence, but I wouldn't put it as this mega rule over everybody. Like I said before, a kid should first experience love within the family. That's not always the case, but it should be. And from that love, they are able to love others. And it's a sequence, not really a rule, right? When a man gets married, when the child, if he's a son, right, when he gets married, he then loves his wife more than his father and mother to the point where he leaves father and mother and becomes one with her, right? And there's also a time in many young adult lives, and this is normal, where your friends become your family. There's that season where your friends really are your family. And I'm only saying this because God's love has no law against it. Some people can't do that sequence because they don't even have family. And so it's not, I wouldn't put it as this general rule, love your neighbor as yourself. And even beyond that, love as Christ loved you, right? So if you have to love everyone by yourself, if you love everyone as yourself or as Christ loved you, that does kind of eliminate that rule in a sense. It may even have that effect. That's why some verses could talk about responsibility and a duty, right? So it helps you prioritize, but in that sense, right, as far as responsibilities go.